Welcome to this session of Deep Focus. I have with me today filmmaker Shilpi Gulati. I have a lawyer Sahana Manjesh, and I have filmmaker Pratik Watts with me. These three people have been the force behind this campaign of late, in which they have sought the comments of sought people to endorse the comments that they've put together on the Cinematograph Act amendments that the government has proposed. This was in June, end of June, that the government came up with a cinematograph amendment bill, which it proposes to table before the parliament, and it had asked for the public to come up with their comments on it. So I think that is what provoked Pratik, Shilpi, and Shahana to kind of come together to start this campaign. Was that it? How did it come together? And at this time, have you submitted those proposals? Because I think today is the last date, July 2nd. Have you submitted it already? And how many signatories have you got? Let's start with those basic facts first.
I'll quickly tell you how we started. On June, I'm currently teaching at the Tata Institute of Social Sciences, and I'm also a PhD student at JNU in Delhi. And my PhD work is on the politics of documentary exhibition and funding in our country. Okay. So as a part of my PhD, I'm looking at censorship of films in the last 20 years. And I look at all kinds of censorship laws that look at all kinds of films, ranging from mainstream commercial films to documentary films to independent films. And it was by chance that a friend of mine forwarded this notice that came out from the government, from the Ministry of Information and Broadcasting on the 18th of June. Mm-hmm. And I immediately got in touch with my friends and realized that no one knows that this has been brought out. And to our surprise, the last date of sending comments, that public could send to the ministry was the 2nd of July. So in a sense, we had 2 weeks to get cracking on this. And and the group came together. So beyond Shahana and Pratik and me, there is also Mani Chandar, there is also Bhargav Rani, and there's a much bigger extended group of people that we've been consulting right now for this particular purpose, but in general, with regard to conversations on censorship in our country.
And how many signatories to your the proposed your comments on the proposed amendments? How many people have endorsed that at the moment?
Shana, what is our final number?
The final number, and we submitted our comments last night actually, because the notice said by the 2nd, so we just wanted to be sure that we're on time. So we had a total of 3583. That was the last count.
Okay.
Of the number of signatories, and we have people from across different industries who signed, different regional cinema, not just Bollywood, independent filmmakers associated with studios, a lot of different film technicians who are obviously also very invested in this issue, and civil society. So we have doctors, lawyers, CAs, different kinds of people who've signed on. So it's really a very diverse group of people who've come together to endorse this document.
Apart from a whole lot of, kind of amendments, regarding piracy, regarding certification, I think the one which has caught the eye the most is the proposal of certification being revoked by the government, at its own will and governed by certain clauses that they have specified. And I think that is what has really created a certain sense of disquiet amongst not just the filmmakers, but I think public in general, because censorship is a bigger issue, isn't it? So Pratik, could you dwell a bit on that aspect? This particular clause. I mean, was that the primary thing which is what you are finding problematic here?
Mm-hmm. See, the thing is, we've always had a problem as a film community, and I speak for both documentary filmmakers, independent, experimental, and Bombay fraternity, that censorship has been a raging debate. Not now, not for 20 years, it's been there for 40, 50, 60 years. right from K. Abbas to, today we've been all talking about it. And, every time the basic has been that we need a process which is, first of all, accepting that audience is mature. It's not infantilizing your audience, which is a legacy of the colonial past. No, so that fundamental has always been there, that you certify films, but please don't ask us to make changes and cuts and audio changes and visual changes and so on and so forth. Now, so this has been quite a fundamental sort of a platform for all filmmakers to rally around. So there's been a constant push towards, okay, we need to have a CBFC which is fiercely independent. No government interference, no sort of bowing down to the current political party of the day. And what happened is that if I wasn't happy with the decision of CBFC, I could go to the tribunal. So there, within the process, there was an appellate body which sort of completed the process. And then if you're not still happy, you could go to court and so on and so forth. But this tribunal was a specialized tribunal. So now overnight, this was dissolved about 2 or 3 months back. And at that point, there was no public consultation asked for, there was no reason given. So the film community was quite taken aback by a decision like this, because FCAT had been one source of, bright spot in the censorship process that we are following here. So following up with that abolition of that tribunal and now giving revisionary powers to the central government, it's sort of taking it back further from, and it is just delegitimizing a process which has been set by law, which is a constitutional body, those kind of things. And again, this is nothing new. High courts and Supreme Courts have given this order before. So we don't understand where this thing is coming from, first of all, except that you want to have a certain kind of final say as governments, which I think is inherently problematic.
Taking off from there, you were saying that the censorship is something which has been a debate for a very long time. Taking it back to, Khwaja Ahmad Abbas days and earlier. Of late, what has really riled me as someone who's been covering cinema for a bit is that absolute abdication, by people, in the film industry of their, essential right to claim the film as their own. They have given into pressures of censorship time and again. And I would want to put it across to all the three of you that has that been an enabler, because to my very basic logic, if you bend, people will make you crawl. It comes to my mind. But do you think has that somewhere empowered the government more in terms of kind of pushing ahead with these kind of measures?
Namrata, there are several ways to answer that question. If I were to speak from a historical point of view or as a social scientist, one is, of course, we are talking about big money when it comes to film industries like Hindi film industry or, Bengal film industry. We're talking about big money. And when so much of money, is at stake, in an area or a sector which is just so widely known, not only in India, but across the world, Indian films, India is the biggest producer of films across the world. There are several pressures under which the producers and the directors have bowed down. And we have seen that across the board, across different regimes. A certain kind of censorship was also there, in the 70s when India was going through, the emergency and things like that. What I have been reading about and understanding is that in addition to this kind of constitutional censorship, which happens from the government, or the pressures that come in from the government, what is also happening is this is coming together of a certain kind of constitutional and extra constitutional censorship, which is putting this kind of pressure on filmmakers. And after a while, it's not even about the money so much, it is about your own life.
Again, what you were saying about Hansal's case, and there have been other films also which have faced this kind of extra constitutional censorship, which I call it. Something like even a traffic signal faced it. A word like kinnar, I remember in a film, was became a point of offense because for various reasons. So these are little things. Padmavat, we had that kind of case going on. Don't you see this particular clause coming in somewhere, weaponizing them by just admitting to taking cognizance of these petty offenses, for the lack of a better word?
Absolutely. This, one would imagine that, for me also, one would imagine that these are two different ways in which the filmmaker is getting suffocated or, being attacked. But the truth is, one feeds into the other. So, in a country like ours, where so much of the political system thrives on identity politics and vote bank politics, tomorrow, if the party in power or the central government has the final say on a film, or certification of the film, and there is a certain group which is demanding removal of that film, then the fact that the political party will give in to that.
In fact, actually, while there may be many times where, like you were saying, Namrata, there are people who sort of bow down to the pressure and for the circumstances that Shilpi has mentioned, but there are also so many times when filmmakers have gone to court to say, that we've got the certificate, despite which we are not being allowed to screen our films, distribute our films. And the courts have held multiple times to say that if there is this so-called public order violence concern that arises, then that's the job of the government to take care of. It doesn't mean that you can pull out the film. But what this amendment is doing is to say, the government can actually put its hand up and say, we assume there is going to be a public order disturbance, and therefore we believe that this film cannot be screened. So that's really actually legitimizing and legalizing what is de facto the situation. All the courts have held otherwise so often, even recently.
Pratik, you pointed out about the arbitrary manner in which the FCAT got abolished. Many people were completely shocked when that happened. And by many people, I mean people from the industry, people who were stakeholders in it. This time round, the comments have been invited. Is there a certain sense of democracy, a democratic process, or is it just a pretense to it? How do you read it?
I mean, thank God they have to follow a process. It's a forming of an act. It can't happen otherwise. But that's what, I'll connect it with the previous question you were asking. You say, okay, process and comments have been asked for. But you see the timing of this thing, film industry, if we take a little kind of what is happening right now, for the past year with COVID, and the industry is sort of rattled, hardcore Bombay film industry, and it's a potentially destabilizing moment where there's a turf war with OTTs and how that's going to play out with theatrical distribution, so on and so forth. Secondly, for 1 year, this industry has been ravaged by mainstream media and totally demonized. The entire credibility around filmmakers or as artists has been degraded very systematically. You make a group of people vulnerable by targeting them like that first. You wait for a point where they're fundamentally struggling with the logistics of the business. You come out with a notice where the mandatory period is 30 days. They've given a 14-day window to give us suggestions. How do you expect big unions with members spread over everywhere, to come apart and give very cohesive kind of suggestions in such a time window? So it's like I can't help but see it as a very sort of critical moment of where film industry is headed in the future. Along with the turf war which is going on between government and OTTs, government and Twitter, the entire digital platform, because they have the lens of information broadcasting. This is how we control broadcast, this is how we control information, and whatever we don't understand is problematic. It just doesn't have to be political. it can be social, it can be moral, it can be any kind of, this anything which questions status quo can become a problem. So I feel that kind of dissolution of SCAT could only have come for after 1 year of delegitimizing the industry. कि ये लोग खराब लोग हैं. These are a gang. This is a gang, So that anything is okay against a gang, yeah. Anything is okay against drug peddlers and people who are corrupted and morally debauched and all that. And that is exactly how the industry has been portrayed, and that is very, very, very unfortunate, I feel. And but at the same time, having said that, just to be able to rally so many filmmakers from mainstream Hindi, Tamil, Malayalam, Bengali, Marathi film industries, and unequivocally with documentary filmmakers say that this is not done. No, I keep saying the people ask film industry kahan hai? Where are the biggies? I don't understand what biggies are we looking for. No, we should see what is being said. And your biggies are spread out. We have to think of who the biggies are. It's like हम जो नाम जानते हैं वो क्यों नहीं है इस लिस्ट में. अभी उसका मैं क्या करूं. मणिरत्नम भी है, मीरा नायर भी है, विशाल भारद्वाज भी है, और अपर्णा सेन भी है, और पारंजित भी है, वेट्रीमारन भी है. तो अभी मैं और क्या करूं, मुझे समझ नहीं आता कि फिल्म इंडस्ट्री कहाँ है. वो खड़ी है और वो बहुत दिन से लड़ाई कर रही है.
At this point, Pratik, I would want you to kind of tell me a few names. You have listed a lot of names, but again, the readers, viewers would be interested in knowing if you guys can recall a few people who have been signatories to this comments which are being sent to the government, which have been sent to the government.
Well, like Sahana said, we sent out one letter with the initial list of signatories, which was, the number was 3583. But we kept application open till today evening. So these names will be sent as a separate kind of addendum to the original application. So last count is about 4,300 that we are still counting. So if the prominent signatories from Hindi would include in fiction films, Vishal Bhardwaj, Meera Nair, Saeed Mirza, Sudhir Mishra, Anubhav Sinha, Zoya Akhtar, Farhan Akhtar, then Shabana Azmi, Dibakar, Anurag Kashyap, Abhishek Chaube, Anvita Dutt, Nitya Mehra, then Vasan Bala. So these are some of them. Then from Tamil, you have Mani Ratnam, you have Paranjit, you have Vetrimaran, you have Kumar Raja Tyagaraja. So, and from Kerala, we have seniors like Dilesh Potan, Rajiv Ravi, Kamal KM, then seniors like Venu, Rasool. From Bengal, we have Aparna Sen, Shumon Mukhopadhyay. And then there's a whole bunch of, like Sana said, senior editors and production designers and scriptwriters like Anjum Rajabali, Shama Zaidi. So, it's quite a generational representation cutting across various industries. You have Umesh from the Marathi film industry, Umesh Kulkarni. So, and the names are still flowing in. So these are the kinds of people who are there from the fiction films. From documentary, you have Surbhi Sharma, Nishta Jain, Ramni, Sanjay Kak, Priya Sen, Shilpi is there. Then you have Madhushri Datta. Then you have, you just have to just go over the whole list and
they're all there. Yeah,
they must be there. More chances are that they're there.
Yeah.
So
yeah, sorry. You were talking about this. We were talking about this whole decimation that one has seen in the past 1 year of, the industry, and I think it was you, Shilpi, who you talked about this whole cultural appropriation, and so somewhere isn't that related? I think there is a certain way in which cultural institutions are all being, chipped at, जैसे कुल्हाड़ी लेके तोड़ने में लगे हुए हैं धीरे धीरे से. So somewhere, is it all part of it? Because I see that happening with media as well. I mean, what is left of media also in the last 1 year, so is it part of that larger process?
I mean, absolutely. I mean, if you were to, I mean, like I said, I mark 1992 as a very big historical moment in our country, and what we are seeing after that, has been a certain kind of attack on different kinds of constituencies, cultural, political, social. I'm also a student of JNU. I have seen exactly how the best university in the country, with where you could go with 250 rupees in a year, has been completely delegitimized, and the students have been completely stigmatized. Under a certain, we know exactly what's been happening in the last 1 year with when it comes to the farmers and the farm laws that have come. So we also know what has happened with, like we're talking about the cinema industry today. We also know what has generally been happening in the names of minority in our country. So across the board, actually, there has been a certain kind of delegitimization, I would say. And while at one level, delegitimization takes place, within the legal sphere, where laws are brought in, funding is cut down, we also know that the new education, I'm also a teacher, so the new education policy is coming. We also know that most public institutions now will have to just fend for themselves, and education is going to become very, very, very expensive. Only the rich will be able to study. So there is actually an overhaul of a system that is happening, which is not only cultural. I think it cuts across several spheres. And this delegitimization on one hand, which happens in the parliament, with the court and the laws and things like that, on ground, you see, like we talked about, it emboldens a certain other category of people who can get out on the street and claim, हम कहते हैं आप उसकी आड़ में आके बहुत कुछ कर सकते हैं, and any voice of dissent, and this is what we were also saying, democratic dissent, and we've been saying this for a long time. It's healthy. Students, it's healthy for students, it's healthy for filmmakers, it's healthy for common citizens to engage with the government, to be critical of the government, to be able to say things about the government, and like we are doing, to engage with the government through comments, through suggestions, to proactively do this. It is a healthy exercise for a democratic society. And if these exercises are curtailed, then a healthy democracy is also going to become very, very, very sick and unhealthy. So I do feel, I see this as a pattern over 30 years, and I see it across the board.
And somewhere I think there is also this other factor you pointed out about the OTT, Prateek. The OTT, we've kept saying that, OTT is permitting people to push the envelope, to kind of get more creative. Somewhere there is that, I just sense this as a pushback of sorts, this far and no further, because I think somewhere we were all celebrating the fact that maybe, it would lead to creators doing the kind of stuff that they want to.
Yeah, but we should also remember these are not just distribution platforms. These are also production houses. Mm-hmm. So they come under pressure.
Okay.
Amazon is trying to also expand its e-business, and for them, films is a little thing, and they will try and accommodate. If the government pushes them, they're not going to stand and say we fight, because it's illogical to expect them. They are a big company, and companies behave in certain manner when they are put under the pump. So to expect anything else would be a little naive, because what Shilpi was saying is the important thing. It's how we function. Is there a participation of the concerned community in the formation of an act? Is the concern of farmers being addressed in the farmers' bill?
We were actually very clear from the very beginning that a lot of the things that are being introduced in this bill have already been discussed about, whether it's piracy, whether it's the censorship and certification process. There has been a lot of conversation through the committee reports of Justice Mudgal and Mr. Shyam Benegal, and also the Information and Technology Standing Committee of the Parliament, which was to look into the issues of piracy. So we realized that this is not entirely new. The bill has had a history with respect to these two issues. But what we found to be completely new and just almost introduced on the slide was this whole aspect of the power of revocation that the central government would have. So we just wanted to trace back these documents to see, has this ever come up before? has this conversation happened before? And obviously, we realized that there is, because of the Supreme Court decision of 2000, which in fact the bill itself quotes, and it says that there was a decision of the Shankarappa case in which a filmmaker from Karnataka, had challenged the power of the central government to have these powers. And the Supreme Court says that power should not vest with the government because there is an independent process set up under an act where you have a CPFC, where you have an FCAT. So when that process has taken place, then there is absolutely no sense. It's almost like saying the central government has the power of appeal. Tomorrow if somebody gets bail and the central government wants to say, we don't agree with this, I'm going to change the decision of the court. It amounts to just that, right? So because the Supreme Court had very clearly stated this principle, no committee has ever had to look into it because it's just so commonsensical and so basic to our democracy. In fact, when we looked at the Justice Mudgal Committee report, there's a long conversation about the power of suspension that the central government has. And by then, the jurisprudence in our country had developed so much that, the right to free speech, in fact, in our country, the right to free speech has mostly evolved with censorship of films. Of course, the press as well, but a lot to do with the certification process. And the principle as it stands is literally that unless there is an immediacy to the public order disorder that a group of people could cause by virtue of their speech, or a film can cause, then there's no way you can ban them, because that's the restriction of free speech that the Constitution recognizes. So the Mudgal Committee has talked about it with respect to suspension and said that it can only be in the most exceptional circumstances, and definitely not in the case of having it in the general process, like it is now being introduced, where the central government can simply say, we believe that it has to be revoked with no process set in place. So we really wanted to trace the history, both judicially and in terms of what different committees specifically have thought about this issue, just to state that we are not saying something new. This is really not and the amount of support that we've got really shows that, right? That there is a general commonsensical understanding of it. And it's also coming from a very sound legal basis. And it's not just this 2000 decision of the Supreme Court. Multiple times thereafter, different people have gone to courts and said, there is a public order problem, there is a national security issue. And the courts have said, no, we've settled this issue. You have a process. It's not like a certificate is given without considering what potential issues this may cause on the public. So if there is a process, then we respect that process. So, that was why we really wanted to make our document as exhaustive as possible in terms of looking at the laws, looking at the committee suggestions, looking at judicial decisions, so that we are backing our arguments with wisdom, community wisdom that's existed for years.
That's a very interesting thing to say, that somehow, this community wisdom is what is usually disregarded. What Pratik, you were saying, the infantilizing of the community, moving on from that, the issue of piracy, because I think somewhere this revocation or recall is something which is catching our eye and is the most problematic. But what about the issue of piracy? Has that been dealt with adequately in the proposals, the amendments, or you feel there is scope there, or do you feel there are issues there as well?
See, I think it's very easy to introduce a penal provision and say, if there is piracy, then we will punish. And in fact, when the the standing committee was set up under the Information Technology Ministry, a lot of the industry people were called in to sort of weigh in on the issue, and piracy was discussed. And of course, it's a concern for everybody, big and small, in the fraternity. There is no two ways to think about that. But introducing a clause that says, a person who's involved in piracy will be punished for 3 years is a sort of knee-jerk response for multiple reasons. One is that actually under the Copyright Act as it stands, the instances of piracy that are trying to be covered under these new amendments are already covered. There's also the Information Technology Act, the rules under that extends the protection of the Copyright Act to the digital platform. So this penalizing provision already exists. States also have their own specific rules and laws. Like the whole Gunda Act is something that a lot of states have been using with respect to piracy. So what we realized was that you're not really doing anything new. And by virtue of that, you're also not giving any extra protection that may be necessary. And again, we are not sort of saying that we know what those protections should be, but we do believe that there are mechanisms that have to be set in place. And see, also, a lot of times what ends up happening, and we've seen this with the Copyright Act, is that the small fish get caught, right? It's easy to catch somebody who may be making a copy for whatever, distributing among his friends. But there are larger issues, larger economic issues that are involved when it happens on a larger scale. Those kind of people don't get caught with a law just like this. You require a more concerted effort. So what we really wanted to say is that great that you're thinking about piracy, but please let's not reduce it to saying, okay, 3 years in jail and that's it. There is nothing else that's required beyond that. And I think that was something that we really wanted to foreground. And also to say that, I mean, even within any kind of use, right? There will always be exceptions that you need to carve out. That's the way the law works, not just this law, any law, because there are multiple possibilities of situations. And in fact, the standing committee was also of that opinion and suggested as much. And in one of the recommendations of the standing committee then finds its way in this bill, which is that the exceptions of the Copyright Act recognizes, which is of public knowledge, information, academic purposes, criticism, all of those are exceptions that are recognized even now within the Cinematographic Act framework. But it's not specific to films. That comes and it's borrowed from the understanding of academic work or literary works or dramatic work, not so much of film. So we just wanted to introduce that aspect also in this document to say that there are multiple different kinds of fair use exceptions which in a dynamic medium like film today can and should be incorporated so that we don't end up catching the small people and then saying, Shabash, we've done such a great job of catching people who are involved in piracy.
Us all, not just, the filmmakers per se. So we hope, there is some, success at the end of it. All the best with the efforts and congratulations for having managed to come so far and kind of got people involved so intensely with a very, very significant issue. Thank you guys for joining. Thank you.